You know what I think? I think everybody is very brave from a safe distance, right? That's what I want to start with. I think everybody knows exactly what they would do if they were the one in the room, right? They would leave. You would fight back, right? You would never let a man talk to you like that. You would just say no. You would just pack your bags and go. Easy, right? Beautiful, very inspiring. What a nice little fantasy. But fear doesn't always look like screaming or running. Fear doesn't always look like bruises and weapons and a man standing over you with his fists raised, right? Fear can look like silence, compliance, like laughing it off, explaining, apologizing, waiting until he falls asleep to cry, keeping the peace, feeling your body completely shut down while your mouth is like, I'm fine. This is what people get so wrong, right? They judge a woman's reaction as if she had full access to logic, options, language, confidence, and safety in the moment. When fear is activated, the brain doesn't behave like a calm person writing a comment on social media from the couch. There are 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And in an abusive relationship, the 2 most common that you see are freeze and fawn. I'm going to break down what people get so wrong about the 4 trauma responses, what they actually look like, and why fear does not actually have to be physical fear to be real, how women are conditioned to fear men's reactions, and how judging her response is the very thing that keeps everyone focused on her survival instead of his choice to make survival necessary. My name is Lisa Sonni. I'm a certified relationship coach and an expert in toxic and abusive relationships. And on my channel, I expose what abusive men are doing in order to help women see what they're experiencing, put language to it, and help themselves get out of these relationships and never, ever make these mistakes again. Now, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they have a belief about what fear looks like, right? Fear has to look really obvious, possibly dramatic. Fear is she's shaking and crying and, screaming or running or calling the police, fighting, leaving immediately. If she was really afraid, she would have just left him, right? But they don't see that fear generally looks way more quiet, right? A woman might smile, she might be still, she might apologize, she might change the subject, she might say yes, she might try to calm him down, she might know how to become softer, she might know how to tell herself it's not that bad. And none of that means that she wasn't afraid. It actually just means that her body was trying to reduce the danger because she was so afraid. What people just do not understand about relational abuse is that fear can be physical, of course, like obviously, right? But fear can also be emotional, financial, social, sexual, legal, parental, psychological. I can go on, right? Fear can sound like, what will he do if I say no, right? What will he take from me? How will he punish me? If he yells, will he wake the kids? Will he threaten custody? If I do this, will he stop paying bills? Will he explode? If I don't give him sex, will he scream at me? Will he leave me with nothing? The body doesn't only respond to fists, it also responds to threat. And what's wild is if you were to talk to people about like an armed robbery or something, they would have all kinds of understanding for the people in the room experiencing that and all the different reactions that people might have. But in an abusive relationship, especially when the perpetrator is a man and the survivor or victim is a woman, we have lots to say, right? We have lots of judgment that we want to throw at the victim of abuse. Abusive men are very creative. They can create threat in so many ways. You don't think that abusive men know exactly how to avoid charges? There's actually a very interesting thing when you look at a threat, right? There's a direct threat and an indirect threat. An indirect threat might be tapping a weapon so that you just make sure you know that I have this weapon, right? And that's not a direct threat because he didn't say anything. He didn't point anything at you, right? A direct threat, that's what that would be. He would point it right in your face and tell you he's going to use it. But an indirect threat is just knowing he has it. An indirect threat is knowing he would do something, like punching a wall instead of punching you. We can all understand those things. Why does the understanding just disappear when it comes to women? Now, I want to just talk about the 4 trauma responses because they are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, right? So fight, just so you see what that would look like. This is the one that I think most people expect victims to use and to feel, which, to be clear, we don't choose which one we're going to use It's what happens in your body, in your nervous system when there is a threat. So fight is when your body moves toward the confrontation. So this is like yelling, pushing back, arguing, defending, threatening, physically resisting. Flight is when your body moves towards escape. You leave the room, you end the conversation, maybe the relationship, you run, you avoid, you block, disappear, you get away, okay? Freeze is interesting because your body can shut down or go still. And this can happen in an armed robbery, by the way, right? You stand there completely paralyzed. I've seen many movies where a man stands there and hands over his wallet. That's a freeze response, right? You can't necessarily think. You might feel numb or stuck or feel like it's unreal. You just don't have the ability to move. That's what you just feel completely frozen. Fawning is easily, in my opinion, the most interesting one because your body tries to survive by appeasing. So you soothe and agree, and maybe you apologize, or you make your abuser dinner, or you have sex that you don't want to have sex. You comply, you manage his emotions, you become easier for him so that you are feeling safer. A lot of women report feeling more in control if they know where he is and he's closer and they can kind of, look into his eyes and read his body language. This is all part of fawning. But you know what really pisses me off? People only seem to respect fight and flight. Those are the two that everybody talk about. And frankly, it's always called fight or flight, and as if freeze and fawn are not part of this, right? And this is actually part of a cultural problem because people understand fight. They can relatively understand a woman screaming, hitting, and running and calling for help because that's what you think you would do if you were going through it. They understand flight if she leaves fast enough and if it's dramatic enough, if it's the way you think that response should look. But freeze and fawn get misread. Freeze looks like weakness and fawn looks like consent. Freeze is like, she stayed, she did nothing, right? She didn't even do anything. Fawn, she chose it. Look what she's doing. She's obviously happy. She's choosing this life. That is so dangerous because women in abusive relationships are not fighting or running away in ways that are obvious to you, the untrained person who doesn't know a lot about fight or flight responses. Women get punished for surviving in the way that their body chooses. You're not having a rational thought here going, wonder what would be the best response. You know what? I think I'll make him dinner. No, that's not what's happening. Freeze isn't consent. I know it looks like passivity for people. That's what so many people think, right? Like she doesn't resist. She's just there. She's not leaving. But actually, she's disassociated. She feels detached from her body. She feels like she can't even access her words. Maybe using her words makes things more dangerous. She might feel that way, and it might be that way. So later, she might wonder herself, why didn't I move? Why didn't I yell? You think later, you know what I would have said? You know what I should have done? But in the moment, you didn't because your nervous system hit a shutdown. Freeze is a survival response when the system senses danger and it can't find like a safe action. So the body says, movement makes this worse, sound makes this worse, resistance is going to make things so much worse here. So I'm just going to stand here. I'm going to be still. This is the woman who a man is screaming in your face and you can't move. Or a man, and I'm talking about a man you love, right? A man is screaming in your face and you can't move, or a man is making you feel unsafe with these indirect threats or covert abuse, and you don't feel like you can move. She's just standing there trying to survive. Now, a fawn response, that is the one that gets misunderstood constantly because I know that it looks like a agreement, and that's what people think that it is, right? Like she's apologizing. I'm sorry, you're right. No, I'll do it. It's fine. Oh, I didn't mean it. I love you. Please don't be mad at me. All of these things. It's caretaking after he hurts you, right? Comforting your abuser when he makes you feel guilty. It is having sex so he stops being pissy and sulking. It's using sex to manage his mood because you're afraid to do anything else because you know you get in trouble when you say no, right? It's dropping the issue so that it doesn't get worse. It's complying. It's giving in to coercive control. Fawn is you trying to create safety through appeasement and compliance. But it's not freely choosing, but it looks like freely choosing. Again, to people who don't understand. I wish that more people who didn't understand things would say crazy things like, I've never been through that. I don't know what I would do. Instead of, I would never let a man treat me like that. I also said that, and I have truly never spoken to a woman who said, when I was a little girl, I always assumed that if a man screamed at me, I would just let him. I assumed that I would stay. Every single victim of abuse thinks that this would never happen to them. Everyone thinks I would never, I would leave, I would whatever. I thought so too, until it happens to you. And then you're like, oh, wait, there's more. There's more information. Abuse conditions fear before the big moment, okay? Before the abuse, there is kindness. People imagine fear kind of starting at this like crisis point, but I think that it starts a lot sooner, right? Fear gets conditioned over time. So the first time you say no and he sulks, we're not going to call that abuse, but that's the beginning of it, right? The first time you say, that hurt me, and he explodes. And like, again, it's not a pattern yet. It's just this one time. So it's like, but you're learning something. You're being conditioned. So the very first time that he gives you the silent treatment for 3 days or calls you crazy or threatens to leave, blocks the doorway, humiliates you for reacting, your body learns, this is what happens when I resist. This is what happens when I say no. Something bad happens when I tell the truth. This is the conditioning. This is subtle. It's not the thing happens and you consciously have these conversations with yourself. You are learning this in your body. Too many women don't recognize when they're actually afraid. The amount of women that are like, well, I'm not afraid of him. And then they describe the ways that their body is recognizing the fear. A lot of women don't want to admit that they're afraid. And I'm going to raise my hand because I absolutely would have said that I'm not afraid of him until there was a point where I absolutely was after physical violence. But before that, I would have been like, no, I'm not afraid of him. Absolutely, I was afraid, right? They say things like, I don't want to upset him. You asked us to go out to dinner on Friday night. Let me get back to you. I know today's Monday, but I'm going to ask him on Wednesday because I know that on Wednesday he's got a better day. It's this little management, right? We all have our own little version of that, right? I have to wait for a better time or, I know how he gets. You're walking on eggshells, oh my God, I can't handle how mad he gets. I just can't handle his reactions. All of this is what I'm talking about. That's fear, right? I'll just do it. I don't want to bother him. I don't want to hear his mouth. I don't want to hear him get upset that I'm asking him to take the garbage out. It's just easier if I do it myself. All of this crap is fear language. And this is what I mean about fear doesn't walk in and go like, hey, I'm fear. And there she is shaking in the corner. Women are trained to rename fear as consideration, right? They're being patient and I'm just going to compromise. And I want to be understanding. It's fear. And abusive men benefit from this little repackaging shit that men do. Now, a lot of men, whenever I talk about this, will say wildly crazy things to me, like, just say no. Women have autonomy. All you have to do is say no. There, see, solution. Men are just the kings of oversimplified solutions because a lot of men will say, she already has autonomy, just fight back. Bro, you have never been a woman saying no to a man who has power over you. Why are you talking? Take every seat. Take every step back. You've never been socialized for your entire life to calculate male reaction as part of survival. Why are you talking? Oh, let me guess. You're a man. You've never had to do the math of, is this worth what might happen next? Should I just give in, right? You think women are just refusing autonomy? They're making decisions inside a threat that most men could never understand. And I would actually argue that basically all men could never understand it. Not that they don't understand a threat. Not that they don't understand the threat of another man. That they don't know what it's like to be a woman being threatened by a man who has power over you. Because that's not what you are. And yet here you are in my comment sections loudly speaking on topics you don't know a damn thing about. These men just want to erase the consequences that men create when women do say no. Now, women do this too, right? Women are constantly talking about their courage that they would have, right? You overestimate that wildly. A woman who's never experienced relational abuse is very easily going to say, I would never tolerate that, right? I would just leave the first time. The first man who talks to me like that, he's done. Okay, maybe not, right? Because you're saying that with a regulated brain, with oxygen and options and no trauma bond and no children involved, with no financial dependence, no fear of escalation, no years of being conditioned in this. with no nervous system that is completely trained around this man's moods. You're acting like fear doesn't change access to the very faculties that people swear they would be using. That's the point. You don't know your trauma response until your body believes that it needs one in that specific situation. Even a woman who, like, in her 20s was afraid of a guy and left him, that doesn't mean that the husband you choose in your 30s who's also abusive will bring out the same trauma response. People have a different trauma response based on so many factors. So what actually happens when the brain has fear activated is the brain prioritizes survival. And that is a good thing, right? Part of that is the planning and reasoning and weighing the options and speaking clearly, and all of that is what's happening when fear is activated. So the body is just moving faster than any of your conscious thoughts. That's why, like, stumbling over your words, or you lose sense of time and you don't have the same confidence that you thought you would. You just don't have the perfect response. You don't know what to say. And so you might comply before you even understand what the hell just happened. You might freeze, but your brain is screaming. You might soothe him or sort of calm him down when another part of you feels disgusted. I'm going to go back to, you might have sex with him when you don't want to because you're scared of the response. And a lot of men will be like, just say no. You just let him cheat. She can't say no. You know that she can't say no. Men actually admit to knowing that she can't say no. And at the end of the day, abusive men are fine with that because they got what they wanted. The fact that she didn't want to, it's not even relevant. Judging women for what they do and how they survive in abusive situations after the fact from this calm body that you have is so dishonest. It is so disingenuous, and it's actually gross. Fawn and freeze keep women extremely stuck because they work temporarily, but they work. And that's the brutal part, right? In the moment, it feels like you are surviving. It feels like it works because it reduces the escalation. The argument goes away. He's calmer. They get through the night. You know, they fawned, and now the kids didn't hear worse. They stop all the abuse temporarily. So what they're doing, what the man is doing, is making the immediate threat smaller because she's complied, freezed, or fawned, right? But it costs her something later because then she feels shame and confusion and self-betrayal, which makes so much sense because she is self-betraying. She might feel disgust towards herself or grief, wondering why she went along. You talk about victims of sexual assault, right? And why did they just go along with it? Why didn't she scream? Are you crazy? She didn't scream because she was frozen in fear. Scream and I'll take your life. Okay, go ahead and scream when somebody has a knife up against you and they're assaulting you. Like, be so for real. People are just crazy to think that they would do something different in the moment. But I compare these rather loud or violent things, and it's hard for people to make the connection to the guy who's not yelling, not holding a weapon against you, not making a direct physical threat. And you don't realize that her body was still conditioned to feel the same threat, even though there's no weapon or physical violence involved. It is the same. It is not my opinion. It is a psychological, indisputable fact. But let me tell you the part that actually just really pisses me off the most. All of these conversations around, well, I would have done this and I would have done that and she should have this and she should have that. You know what you're not talking about? What he did. And that's the whole friggin' point. When everyone debates whether or not she should have been afraid at all, whether or not she should have left, how she left, if she should have fought, should have said no, kindly or loudly, whether she reacted correctly or the way that you would have apparently reacted, you're just moving the conversation away from him and his choices and his intimidation and his willful choice to be abusive, his entitlement and all of the conditions that he created to make her feel afraid. She is the case study. She is on trial, and her staying on trial is where he wants it. It's where everyone wants it to be because it enables abuse. So if you are the kind of person who has said, I would have left, I invite you to shut your mouth. I invite you to learn something from this video and in further research on your own to feel free to verify the things that I'm saying. Because at this moment, as you are a person who believes that and openly says that out loud, you are an enabler of abuse. And I think that you should be ashamed of yourself, not the women who are trying to survive these relationships. And if I seem angry, that makes sense to be angry at things like this, because this is how abuse is perpetuated. And frankly, this is how abuse is perpetuated against both men and women. While the topic of my video is men's abuse of women, it absolutely happens in the reverse, and men can be afraid too. Fear does not always have to look the way that outsiders expect, right? A woman can be afraid and smile. She can be terrified and stay. She can be shaking and still have sex. She can still be afraid and love him. Not to mention, trauma bonds mimic love. Women can be afraid and not know that they're afraid. They can say, I'm not afraid of him, when they're actually terrified. A much better question is, what did he do that made her body believe that survival was necessary? People get fear wrong because they imagine themselves as like some superhero of a situation that they've never actually had to survive. You imagine the perfect no, the perfect exit, the perfect clap back, the perfect boundary. But all of this is not the reality of the situation, because abusive relationships aren't happening in this little classroom exercise that people are doing in their brains. It's inside conditioning and power imbalances and escalation and families and sexual pressure and punishment. Years of being trained to manage his reaction before you can even name how you feel. So before you judge women for freezing and fawning and staying or going quiet, apologizing and making her abuser dinner, or not recognizing her own fear, ask why a man created the environment where those responses made perfect sense. Hit subscribe if you're not already. And if you feel stuck in a relationship like this, if you're trying to understand your own feelings, your own fear, you can work with me one-on-one inside any of my group coaching programs, or join me inside my online survivor community called She Rises Collective. I co-host it with Shelly Pumphrey, a licensed therapist. And this is where we do group coaching and we do workshops and special events. And there's lots of posts and videos that you won't see anywhere else. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.